U.S. President Joe Biden brands Republican backers of his predecessor as semi-fascist. His Brazilian counterpart lambasts as vandals and fascists the pro-Bolsonaro mobs who invaded the Congress in Brasilia on the 8th of January 2020. The 2022. The mayor of Tel Aviv warns that Israel is sliding into a fascist theocracy. Modi's Hindu supremacist citizenship legalization is deemed the offspring of a fascist vision, while Russia's invasion of Ukraine, grotesquely advertised as a denazification program, is seen to signal the regime's accelerating fascization. This is a quote from Albert Toscano's book entitled Late Fascism, Race, Capitalism, and the Politics of Crisis, and serves as one of the scariest thoughts of the modern political landscape, that we are sliding back to errors of the past. The biggest of these errors being, of course, fascism. And since the 1990s, American politicians and political writers have been worried about how America is slipping ever deeper into an isolationist and reactive culture. And what I want to present to you today is that fascism is what fascism is and where it is cropping up around the world, so that we can have an effective means to understand it as well as fight it. I've brought together both recent accounts of what the political landscape of the world is looking like, as well as theorists who have predicted how capitalism and other political systems would always have fascism endemic to them. We'll first get into what theorists perceive as the roots of fascism, as well as go into modern examples of fascistic thought before ending on how to fight it. What I think is important to convince you on what fascism looks like is to connect this both to Nazi Germany as well as fascist Italy, because even academics' theses on what fascism is concretely are rare. Robert Paxton in The Anatomy of Fascism outlines the threat more concretely than I ever could when he puts, many have seen in fascism's ultimate wartime radicalization, the murder of the Jews, a denial of modern rationality and a return to barbarism. Nazi racial cleansing built upon the purifying impulses of the 20th century medicine and public health, the eugenicist eagerness to weed out the unfit and the unclean, an aesthetic of the perfect body, and a scientific rationality that rejected moral criteria as irrelevant. It has been suggested that old-fashioned pogroms would have taken up to 200 years to complete what advanced technology wrought in 3 years of the Holocaust. What Paxton is pointing out perfectly here is that fascism is built on social phenomena of hatred towards minority groups. When there's a depression in the economy, vast layoffs, as well as people going undernourished and surviving off breadcrumbs, it seems a natural part of the human psyche to seek out a fall guy. Pair this with recent developments in eugenics and the human pursuit of perfection, and you get the Holocaust. The modern reaction to this information is that it happened in the past, that it is ancient news at this point and has been long triumphed over. But this piece afforded to us after World War II is exactly what Dave Renton feared would happen back in 1999. To quote Fascism Theory and Practice, fascism has returned and will again because fascism is a recurrent feature of modern capitalism. Fascism thrives on bitterness and alienation, both of which capitalism nourishes with regular doses of unemployment and crisis. This fuels despair, which further stimulates fascism to grow. Fascism lives off racism, sexism, and elitism, while capitalism promotes its own prejudices guised as a common sense beliefs, which seem to fit people's experiences while effectively holding them back from challenging the system. Capitalism generates the myths of racism and elitism, which fascists use for themselves. I hate to suggest it, but capitalism necessarily breeds despair and pain and hatred. All of this amalgamated pain from being laid off or eating at McDonald's for the third time this week can culminate in a society which seeks to find out who the problematic people are and what we should do about them. As Leon Trotsky puts in Fascism What It Is and How to Fight It, fascism as a mass movement is the party of counter-revolutionary despair. To summarize, we are part of a system that makes people disenfranchised, and in that pain, they seek out to pin their fears onto a group of people to blame. Where that leads is to the horrific tragedies like the Holocaust. But now, we must examine how close we are to the base tendencies of fascism. I would argue that we, as a society, are far off from Nazi Germany, and if anyone would try to even compare the modern situation to something that horrific, they're doing the tragedy a disservice. But there's a lot of harmful and alarming rhetoric that is circulating that comes from a place of fascism. As Noah Caldwell Gervais puts it, we as Americans already have a history with fascism. To quote, the Nazis famously studied American segregationist policies when formulating their own systems of oppression. In the decades leading up to World War II, a comfortable and far-reaching KKK openly marched on the streets of the capital. But this past translates to a present as well. I have to talk about President Donald Trump, mainly because he has been the biggest political proponent of circulating this rhetoric. To quote Fascism in America, Past and Present, charges that Trump was a fascist faded somewhat, but they returned in dramatic fashion during the heated 2020 presidential campaign, especially after the president's inaction following the killing of 3 liberal protesters by a teenage gunman, Kyle Rittenhouse, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the FBI's uncovering of a plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and the rise of the conspiratory QAnon movement. These fears grew stronger than after Trump's dispatching of the National Guard to violently disperse ordinary citizens protesting the killing of George Floyd in Washington, D.C., and after the president's endorsement of white nationalist Proud Boys in his notorious first debate with Joe Biden in the fall, promoting groups like the Proud Boys, who are proudly racist, or sending the National Guard to disperse protesters, comes with the context that you are supporting an innately fascistic message and quelling disagreements with force. But America isn't the only culprit, as Andrina Martini points out in her excellent article talking about fascism in European democracies. She found an increase in racist, sexist, and discriminatory ideologies post-World War II, as well as how foundational pillars of democracy, such as freedom of expression, were set to aside. Or even Ledwig's article, where she focuses on India and Brazil and finds that women inside of the far-right political spheres elevated messages of domesticity and the innate weakness of women. These are inherently paradoxical, yet Ledwig uses qualitative measurements to show that these issues still persist. From America to Europe to Brazil to India, fascistic rhetoric is cropping its head. But now, we must consider how we need to stop it from spreading. I don't have any evidence or any theorist here, mainly because I don't need any. We've already discussed how fascism is innate to capitalistic societies, and how it preys on people's fears and pain to cause even more fear and pain. This is perpetuated modernly with the promotion of racist messages by even our once elected president, and can be found all over the globe. And the best way to stop this hate can start with you, wherever you may be. What you have to do is cultivate a local message of acceptance. If you have a gay son, a trans daughter, or if your kids bring over children of another race, what you have to do is disregard generational hatred of the other. Disregard all of the toxic and hollow political messages, and choose to love everyone, regardless of if they co-sign to your worldview. Fascism's politics focus on spreading despair and hatred. What I need from you is to combat that hatred at every turn in your life. I'm not asking you to join some revolutionary sect, but to hug your daughter and tell her that you'll love her no matter what her sexual orientation is. To summarize, fascism is an ideology based on hatred and social phenomena that spreads through us. We can see it rise all over the world today, and while scary, it is stoppable. What we can do is simple, luckily. We just need to accept one another and not tolerate violence against the weakest in our society. It can feel impossible to change the world, but you'd be surprised what a singular word can do. Thank you.